Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name's Harold, and I'm 44 years old. I've spent over 2 decades of my life on the road, hauling freight, chasing miles, and sleeping in the back of my rig more times than I can count. I drive trucks for a living, but that's just my job. My real life, my heart, is back home in Willowbend, a quiet little town tucked between 2 dusty highways. A town where my wife, Dana, and our 9-year-old son, Caleb, are my whole world. I worked my knuckles raw for 15 years to afford a modest 2-bedroom house on Chestnut Lane. Not fancy. But it has an old maple tree out back. Big, sturdy, and crooked just enough to spark a child's imagination. The kind of tree you see in fairy tales. It was Caleb's idea, really. "Dad, let's build a treehouse," he squealed one day, eyes full of wonder, arms flailing. He called it Eagle's Nest, because he wanted to feel like he could fly. I smiled, but I wasn't the man who could build something magical with just a hammer and hope. That was my father-in-law, Raymond. Retired carpenter. Vietnam vet. Calm as a whisper, strong as an oak. He lived with us since Dana's mom passed. And when Caleb begged him for help, Raymond didn't hesitate. "We'll build it ourselves," he said, patting Caleb's head. "Better than any store-bought junk." Over 3 weekends, they built it from scratch. The laughter, the sawdust, the smell of cut wood, it became the soundtrack to our backyard. Caleb designed it with hidden compartments and a rope ladder. Dana painted the walls sky blue. And I watched my son climb into it, screaming joyfully as Raymond held the ladder. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But peace has a way of attracting storms. His name is Marcus, my younger brother. 3 years my junior, 10 times more reckless, and endlessly spoiled by our parents. While I worked every mile to buy a home, Marcus coasted on charm and manipulation. Drifting from one failed startup to the next, he never stayed in one place long enough to water the plants. Until he moved in next door. I'll never forget that day. Dana saw the "sold" sign vanish, and a familiar black sports car pulled into the driveway beside ours. I walked out to grab the mail, and there he was. Aviator sunglasses. Designer jeans. That smirk. "Well, look who bought himself a patch of middle-class paradise," he said. I stared at him. "What are you doing here?" "Parents bought it for me. Said I needed some stability. Figured we could be neighbors. Fun, right?" I didn't answer. I just walked inside. That was the beginning. Within the first week, the music started. Loud, pulsing bass shaking our bedroom walls past midnight. Strange cars parked half on the lawn. People stumbling out with red cups. Dana started sleeping with a pillow over her ears. Caleb stopped playing in the backyard. I knocked on Marcus's door one night, asking him to keep it down. He laughed. "Come on, Harold. Don't be a grump. It's just a little fun. It's 2 a.m. Caleb has school." He raised an eyebrow. "Didn't realize you turned into Dad. Lighten up." I clenched my fists but walked away. I had too much to lose. But I never imagined he'd go after the one thing that meant everything to us. One morning, I woke up to Dana screaming. I bolted outside barefoot, heart pounding. And that's when I saw it, Caleb's treehouse, gone. Not damaged. Not vandalized. Destroyed. Planks shattered on the ground. Paint chipped. Rope ladder slashed. The maple tree itself bore fresh saw marks, like someone tried to take it down entirely before giving up. Raymond stood by the base of the tree, silent. His hands clenched. His eyes wet. Caleb was sobbing on the porch steps, hugging his knees. I picked up a piece of wood, still faintly blue, and felt it splinter in my hand. A small sticker, Caleb's drawing of an eagle, was torn in half, dangling off the edge. "Who did this?" Dana cried. We all knew. I looked toward the fence and saw Marcus's trash can, filled with blue-painted wood. Our wood. Caleb's dream. That afternoon, I confronted him. "You touched the treehouse," I growled. Marcus shrugged. "It was an eyesore. Made the whole yard look like a daycare center. Thought I'd help clean things up. You trespassed. You destroyed something Caleb and Raymond built together." His eyes narrowed. "Relax, big bro. It's just wood and nails." I wanted to hit him. Right then and there. But Raymond's voice echoed in my head, "Don't let rage make your decisions. Let justice do the work." I turned around and walked back. But inside, something snapped. This wasn't just about a treehouse. Marcus took my son's joy. He burned what little peace we had. He wanted war. And from that moment forward, I was ready to give it to him. That night, after the treehouse lay in ruins, Caleb refused to eat dinner. He sat on the couch, still wearing his Superman pajamas, holding the remains of a broken wooden flag he and Raymond had carved together for Eagle's Nest. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sat there, staring through the living room window at the mutilated maple tree. Dana tried to comfort him. She offered ice cream. She told him they'd build a new one, even better than the last. But Caleb just whispered, "It's not the same." And he was right. That treehouse wasn't just a structure. It was a memory in motion. A legacy shared between a grandfather and grandson. A safe space, built with love and sweat, filled with secrets and dreams. And it was gone. Raymond didn't say much that evening. He sat out on the porch, smoking a cigarette he hadn't touched in 6 years. I joined him, handing him a glass of whiskey without a word. We stared at the shredded rope ladder lying in the grass, still swaying in the night breeze like a noose. "You okay?" I asked. He took a long drag before answering. "I built a treehouse with my brother when we were kids. Back in Mississippi. We used to sit up there and pretend the world below didn't exist. When he passed away in '79, I kept a piece of that treehouse. Carried it in my wallet for years." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "This one was for Caleb. And now it's just, gone." I nodded slowly, feeling the pressure in my chest growing heavier with every minute. I hadn't felt this helpless in a long time. Not when I lost my job during the recession. Not when Dana had complications giving birth to Caleb. This was different. This was personal. The next day, I tried to stay strong. I made Caleb pancakes. I told him we'd take a trip into town, maybe buy some new Lego sets. I even suggested we go camping for the weekend. Anything to lift his spirits. But he just shook his head and said, "Will it make the treehouse come back?" Dana looked at me over the breakfast table. Her eyes said what her lips didn't: "Fix this." I tried to go to work that day. I climbed into my truck and drove 2 hours out toward Interstate 74. But I couldn't focus. Every rest stop felt like a prison cell. Every mile I clocked only reminded me of the ones I should have spent at home. By the 3rd hour, I turned around. When I got back to Willowbend, I found Raymond sanding down a new piece of wood in the garage. "Gonna build it again," he muttered. "Not for me. For Caleb." But something in his movements told me it wasn't just about construction. It was about holding on to something that couldn't be rebuilt. Meanwhile, Marcus. He was throwing another backyard barbecue. I saw him laughing with some new friends. They played beer pong, grilled steaks, and blasted music like nothing had happened. He even made a toast. "To new beginnings," he said loud enough for me to hear across the fence. I went back inside, jaw clenched. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Dana slept beside me. In my mind, I replayed everything. Caleb's face. The broken boards. Marcus's smug smirk. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to scream, to fight, to burn his entire world the way he'd burned ours. But then I remembered what Raymond said. Let justice do the work. The question was, what did justice look like? I woke up early the next morning and took a walk around the neighborhood. That's when I ran into Mrs. Platt, our neighbor across the street. A kind widow who brought over cookies every Sunday. She gave me a tight smile and said, "Harold, I just wanted to say. I saw what your brother did. We all did." My stomach twisted. You saw him cut it down? She nodded. He was out there at 3 a.m. with a saw. I thought about calling the police, but by the time I grabbed the phone, it was already too late. I felt rage boil in my throat again. Why didn't you say anything? She looked at me gently. Because I figured you'd know. But if you ever decide to do something about it, Harold, know that you're not alone. That sentence stuck with me. You're not alone. Later that day, I visited the backyard again. Caleb was sitting under the tree, hugging his knees. You want to help me draw up plans for the new one? I asked gently. He shook his head. It'll just get destroyed again. That did it. That was the moment despair turned into purpose. I knew I had to do something. Not just rebuild the treehouse, but rebuild my son's belief that the world wasn't a cruel place. That dreams don't get shattered without consequences. I walked back into the house, grabbed a notebook, and opened a blank page. At the top, I wrote in big, bold letters. Plan A, make him pay. They say the best revenge is living well. But I didn't want to live well. Not yet. Not until Marcus felt even a fraction of what he'd done to Caleb, to Raymond, to Dana, and to me. So I started with observation. Every day after work, I'd sit in the backyard pretending to sip beer and stare off into the distance. But I wasn't zoning out, I was watching. Watching Marcus. Watching who came to his house. Watching when the lights went on and when they stayed off. I became a ghost with a clipboard. It didn't take long to notice the pattern. Marcus kept strange hours. But more than that, he had visitors, dozens of them, people who didn't look like your average Willowbend neighbors. They were younger. Flashier. Guys in shiny shoes and women in too tight dresses with expensive handbags. They stayed for 10, maybe 20 minutes, then left quickly, often carrying something small and discreet. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was just throwing more parties. But then I saw someone exchange an envelope on the porch. Twice. That didn't sit right. I told Dana. She frowned. You think he's dealing? I don't know, I said. But something's off. The next day, I spoke with Raymond. Told him what I'd seen. He scratched his chin and looked toward Marcus's house. If he's doing something illegal, you need proof. I'm not calling the cops without something solid. Then we get solid, Raymond said with a quiet calm. And I think I know how. Turns out Raymond had an old hunting camera. Motion sensitive. HD resolution. He used it back when he and his brother hunted deer in Mississippi. We mounted it just under the overhang of our garage, angled perfectly at Marcus's porch. A second one we hid in the bushes next to the maple tree. I felt a little guilty at first. But that guilt evaporated when the first video came in. On a Friday night, 3 people showed up, each at separate times, each looking around nervously. They knocked. Marcus came out smiling, always dressed too clean for a guy with no real job. There was quick conversation. An envelope handed off. A small package exchanged. Then they were gone. Dana leaned over my shoulder, watching the footage. That's not just weed. Raymond's face hardened. He's selling more than just fun. This is heavy stuff. I checked public records next. That's when I learned something even worse. Marcus wasn't the owner of the house. It was still under our parents' name. My mom and dad had bought it outright. Which meant if anything illegal happened on the premises, it wouldn't just hit Marcus. It would hit them, too. And they had no idea. I felt the war inside me. Part of me wanted to go straight to my parents. But I already knew how that would go. They'd defend him. Make excuses. Blame me for spying or not being forgiving enough. Just like they had our whole lives. No. If this was going to be done, it had to be airtight. Inarguable. I needed more. Over the next 2 weeks, we collected over 10 videos. Multiple visitors. Multiple handoffs. Some of them, disturbingly, looked like high school seniors. Raymond and I saved every file. Dated. Timed. Labeled. I even started tracking license plates. One of them came back registered to a man with 3 prior arrests for possession. That was the turning point. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted justice. I drove to the sheriff's station in the next town over. Sat down with an officer named Halvorsen, gray-bearded, tired eyes, but sharp as a tack. He reviewed the footage. Said little. But by the end of the hour, he closed the folder and looked me in the eye. "You've done your homework," he said. "We'll take it from here. Don't engage your brother. Let us handle it." I nodded, but I knew Marcus. He'd feel something coming. He always did. So I had to move faster. Before I left, Halvorsen gave me one last piece of advice. "If you got family tied up in this, warn them now. Quietly. Before they find out in court." I thanked him, walked out to my truck, and just sat there. Staring at the wheel. Hands clenched. Because I knew what had to come next. I had to talk to my parents. The people who never once believed I was the good son. The next morning, I drove 2 hours to my parents' house. I hadn't planned on going. Hadn't called. I just knew if I stopped to think about it, I might never follow through. They still lived in the old place I grew up in. 2-story, faded shutters, the same wind chimes that clinked on the porch for decades. I parked on the curb and stared at the front door for a long time. I felt like a teenager again, about to be scolded for something Marcus had done. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I rang the bell. Mom answered, her usual cardigan over a pressed blouse. She blinked in surprise. "Harold? Can we talk?" I asked. She opened the door slowly. "Is this about Marcus?" I stepped inside. "Yes. And no. It's about the house. The one you bought him." Her lips pressed into a tight line. Dad was in the living room, reading. When he saw me, he lowered the paper. "Something wrong?" "Yeah," I said. "Something's very wrong." I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them everything, about the noise, the destruction of Caleb's treehouse, the shady visitors, the videos. I showed them a few on my phone. I didn't ask for a reaction. I just let the truth hang there like a fog. My dad stared at the screen longer than I expected. Mom, on the other hand, was already shaking her head. "No. That can't be. He wouldn't." "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't defend him. Not this time. He's your brother. And that's why I didn't call the cops sooner. That's why I let it go when he destroyed my son's dream. But I'm done. If this blows back on you, you should know now. He's going to get caught, and soon." My dad stood up, his face pale. "The house is in our name." "Exactly. If you want to protect yourselves, transfer it. Sell it. Whatever. Just don't say I didn't warn you. They didn't ask me to stay for coffee. I didn't expect them to. I drove back home with the weight of that conversation sitting on my chest. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel victorious. But it felt necessary. Later that night, Raymond and I sat in the garage, watching another set of visitor footage. It was like clockwork now, Marcus dealing like he was invincible. I glanced at the folder we kept on the table, 15 videos, license plates, timestamps. They're going to arrest him soon, I said. Raymond nodded. You ready for what comes after? No, I said honestly. But I'll handle it. Then Raymond leaned forward. Let me ask you something, Harold. If you could have stopped him before the treehouse, would you? I looked at him, confused. What do you mean? What if you'd known what he was capable of? Would you have acted earlier? That question stuck with me. Because the truth is, I saw it coming. Maybe not the destruction. But I knew Marcus. I knew what he was capable of. And I let him move in next door thinking I could just ignore the wreckage he always leaves behind. Not anymore. I wasn't just planning for the arrest. I was planning for what came next. I knew Marcus would try to worm his way out. Deny it. Blame me. Maybe even try to come after my job, my family, my life. So I did what every trucker knows how to do, I prepared for the long haul. I made copies of everything and mailed them to a friend of mine who worked in logistics compliance. If anything ever happened to me or my family, she'd know what to do. I reinforced the cameras. Installed a second motion light near the garage. Dana helped me sort the files. Raymond bought a lockbox to store the originals. We weren't just building a case. We were fortifying a fortress. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding Eagle's Nest with Caleb and Raymond. This time bigger. Stronger. Higher. Because if Marcus destroyed it again, the world wouldn't see a grieving family this time. They'd see the fury behind it. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. The sky was cloudless. Caleb was helping Raymond drill the side panel on the new Eagle's Nest 2.0. Dana was inside prepping dinner, and I had just pulled into the driveway after a long delivery route, sore but satisfied. Then the black and white cruisers rolled in. 2 cars. 4 officers. They stopped right in front of Marcus's house. I stepped out of my truck slowly, wiping my hands on my jeans. I didn't say anything, just leaned on the tailgate and watched. Raymond noticed first and put down his drill. Caleb whispered, "Dad, what's going on?" I knelt beside him. "It's okay, bud. Stay close to Grandpa. Just watch." From across the fence, Marcus emerged, barefoot, wearing a wrinkled tee and basketball shorts, squinting like a man dragged from bed too early. His confident swagger was gone. One of the officers stepped forward and asked him a few questions. Then they showed him a warrant. Marcus tried to laugh it off, arms raised like some parody of innocence. "What is this? Some kind of mistake?" But the officers weren't laughing. They stepped past him into the house. It didn't take long. They came out carrying 2 clear evidence bags. One had pills. The other had a Ziploc filled with something that looked like crushed powder. A third officer brought out a locked box they'd pried open inside. Cash. Stacks of it. Marcus's face drained of all color. That's when the handcuffs came out. And that's when he saw me. His eyes locked on mine, burning, hateful. As if I'd stabbed him in the back. As if I was the villain in his story. He screamed across the lawn, "You set me up." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stood there with my arms folded, watching as the officers guided him into the cruiser. He kept shouting. "I know it was you, Harold. You think this is over? The door slammed shut before he could say anything else. And just like that, he was gone. The neighborhood slowly returned to life. Mrs. Camilla across the street, who hadn't walked her dog past Marcus's house in months, strolled by with a wave. Mr. Beale, the retired postal worker, tipped his hat at me while gardening. Even Mr. and Mrs. Kim from 2 houses down brought over a pie for Caleb, congratulating him on the new treehouse rebuild. Eagle's Nest 2.0 was almost done. Caleb smiled again. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Because 2 nights later, around 1:30 in the morning, someone threw a brick through our front window. It missed the living room by a few feet and shattered against the fireplace. Dana screamed. Caleb ran from his room. Glass everywhere. The note attached to the brick said only 4 words. "You started this war." I called the sheriff. They came and filed a report, but we both knew they couldn't prove anything. Marcus had friends. Angry, reckless ones. The kind who'd throw a brick through a child's window just to send a message. Raymond sat at the kitchen table, his jaw set. They want a war. Fine. But we're not playing their game. I nodded. Because now it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about defense. It was about protecting our home from the rot Marcus left behind. 2 days later, the twist came, and it was one I didn't see coming. I got a call from my mother. Her voice. Cold. "You happy now?" she said, her words brittle. "You've destroyed your brother's life." My grip on the phone tightened. I didn't destroy anything. He did that himself. You humiliated him. Did you see the evidence, Mom? The cash? The pills? You bought that house. You almost got caught in a legal crossfire. She ignored me. You were always jealous of him. I nearly dropped the phone. Jealous? Yes. You've always hated how he lights up a room. How people love him. You were never the favorite, Harold, and you never got over it. I stood there in the garage, stunned, heart pounding. After all this. After protecting them. After warning them. She still picked Marcus. She still saw me as the villain. I didn't argue. I just ended the call. And that night, for the first time since the treehouse fell, I allowed myself to grieve. Not just for Caleb. Not just for the broken window. But for the family I thought I had. Because in that moment, I realized something brutal. Sometimes, revenge doesn't cost your enemy anything. Sometimes, it costs you everything you thought was real. 3 days after that phone call with my mother, I got served. A knock on the door. A manila envelope. A signature line. Inside. A civil suit. Marcus was suing me. Claiming I defamed his character, planted drugs, and ruined his professional reputation. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Professional what? He had no job. No resume. His only profession was chaos. But the suit was real. I handed the envelope to Dana, who sat at the kitchen table with her coffee gone cold. "This is it," I said. "He's trying to drag us down with him." Dana looked up, calm and measured like always. "Then we don't flinch. We do what we've always done. We fight back, with the truth." I called Officer Halvorsen, the one I'd met during the investigation. He wasn't surprised. "This happens sometimes," he said. "Guilty people try to flip the script. But don't worry. We've got your back. And we're not done with Marcus." "What do you mean?" I asked. Halvorsen hesitated, then said, "Let's just say your brother's little operation wasn't as small as he thought. We're building a bigger case." It hit me then, this wasn't just about the treehouse, or even about our street. Marcus was tied into something broader. Something nastier. I started to worry. Because when people like Marcus get desperate, they don't think. They lash out. That same week, I found out the biggest twist of all. Not from the police. Not from my parents. But from a man named Ron Weaver. He was a real estate agent in town, a guy I'd met years ago when I was looking for homes before we settled in Willowbend. Good man. Straight shooter. He called me out of the blue. "Hey Harold," he said, voice tight. I didn't know how else to say this, but I thought you should hear it from me. "Your brother, Marcus. He came into my office last month." I sat down. "Why?" He asked if there was any way to file paperwork to reclaim your house. I blinked. "What?" "Yeah." Said he had power of attorney from your parents. Asked if there were any legal workarounds since they co-signed your original mortgage years ago, which, by the way, we both know is long paid off. I shut him down, of course. "But I thought you should know. He was trying to get your property under his name." I went silent. Ron added, "That man wasn't just jealous of you, Harold. He was actively trying to strip everything you had." I hung up and stared out the window at Eagle's Nest 2.0. My throat tightened. This wasn't just vandalism. It wasn't just drugs or slashed ladders or loud music. It was a full-on campaign. Marcus hadn't destroyed the treehouse because it was ugly. He destroyed it because it was mine. He saw my son's laughter, my wife's joy, my father-in-law's pride, and he wanted to erase it. Because if he couldn't build anything of his own, he'd rather reduce mine to ashes. I sat with that for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. It was time to finish what I started. I gathered every video, every timestamp, every report. I compiled them into a clean folder, added Ron's statement in writing, and sent it all to a local attorney, a woman named Mabel Castillo, known in town for representing families dealing with domestic sabotage. "Will you take this?" I asked her over the phone. Her answer was simple. "Let's bury him legally." A week later, Marcus's civil suit was thrown out for lack of evidence. The judge practically scoffed at it. The bigger case, the criminal investigation, went federal. Marcus was officially indicted. He had no money for real lawyers, so he started making calls. To my parents. To old friends. To neighbors. Every single one turned him down. Even my parents, who once defended him blindly, started asking questions they never had before. "Why would you try to take Harold's house?" my dad asked in a message Marcus accidentally left on Dana's voicemail. There was silence. Then, "Because he doesn't deserve it. I built nothing, and he gets everything." That one voicemail. We sent it to the DA. Nailed the coffin shut. That Sunday, Caleb climbed into Eagle's Nest 2.0 for the first time and said, "It's higher than before." I stood beneath him, tears prickling my eyes. "Yeah," I said. "Because now, it can see over everything." The morning of Marcus's sentencing, the skies over Willowbend were overcast. A gray blanket hung overhead, heavy and expectant, like the silence before a storm, or maybe the clearing that follows one. Dana offered to come with me, but I told her to stay home with Caleb. Raymond was already in the passenger seat by the time I locked the front door. We drove to the courthouse in silence. "I don't need to see him go down," Raymond said as we turned off Chestnut Lane. "But I think you do." He was right. This wasn't about watching Marcus suffer. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. For my son. For my family. For me. The courtroom was cold. Marcus stood at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit. He looked nothing like the smug man who had waved at me with aviators and arrogance months ago. He was pale. Thinner. Jaw tight. Eyes empty. He didn't even look at me. The judge listed the charges: drug distribution, possession with intent, endangering minors, attempted fraud. Each count hit like a gavel to the ribs. When the final sentence came, 7 years, no parole, Marcus didn't flinch. But I saw it. That flicker in his eyes. He wasn't shocked. He was just, done. As they led him away, he glanced toward the gallery. Not at me. But at the space beside me where our parents should have been. They hadn't shown. And in that moment, I think Marcus finally realized what he'd lost. Not just freedom. Not just a house. But the last threads of a family that once believed he could be saved. Outside, Raymond and I stood on the courthouse steps, watching as storm clouds scattered above us. I thought I'd feel different, I said. How do you feel? He asked. Empty. But steady. He nodded. That's what it means to win the right way. When I got home, Caleb was sitting in Eagle's Nest 2.0, dangling a walkie-talkie from the railing. Dad, can you hear me? He said, static crackling. I climbed the rope ladder and sat beside him. I hear you loud and clear, Captain. He grinned. I added a telescope. We can see the Kim's garden now. I looked out across our street, peaceful, bright, alive. The chalk drawings on the sidewalk still faintly visible, the music of a distant wind chime playing like a lullaby. I wrapped my arm around his shoulder. This is your fort, I said. Nothing's gonna touch it again. Not even Uncle Marcus. There it was. The question I'd been waiting for. No, I said. Not even him. Good, Caleb replied. Because next week, we're adding a flag. I smiled. You got it, buddy. That night, after dinner, Dana handed me a small box. What's this? I asked. Open it. Inside was a hand-carved plaque. Light cedar, engraved in Raymond's neat lettering. Eagle's Nest, rebuilt stronger. I swallowed the lump in my throat and held it against my chest. Raymond smiled from the doorway. Thought it deserved something permanent. We hung the plaque that same night, just under the window Caleb liked to sit in. Under the motion sensor light that still clicked on whenever someone passed by. Except now, no one snuck around our yard. No bricks. No parties. No shouting. Just wind. And peace. As the summer rolled in and the nights got warmer, I found myself sitting on the porch more often. Watching Caleb climb his treehouse. Watching Dana tend to her sunflowers. Watching Raymond whittle birds from scrap wood. The war was over. Not without wounds. But we were still here. Stronger. Together. And as the days went on, I stopped checking the security cameras every night. Stopped waiting for the next knock. Because I knew the only footsteps coming up my driveway now, were welcome ones. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.